Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sungyeon Choi Morrow, and I'm the Executive Director here at the National Asian Pacific
Good
American
afternoon,
Women's
everyone,
Forum. Or good morning, depending on where you are. Okay, I think I'm just going to keep going. I feel like there's some feedback, but hopefully everyone can hear me okay. NAPAWF, we go by NAPAWF as our short acronym, and NAPAWF is the only national organization that focuses on public policy advocacy through leadership development, organizing, and partnership for Asian American and Pacific Islander women and girls in the U.S. And on behalf of NAPAWF, and in recognition of Women's History Month, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this special conversation on Catching the Pulse, how AANHPI women are meeting this moment. Asian American Pacific Islander women have long been a part of activism and politics in this country, from Patsy Mink, the first ever elected women of color and Asian American woman to Congress as a representative from Hawaii, to NAPAWF's favorite four, Grace Lee Boggs, Yuri Kochiyama, Helen Zia, and Ninochka Roska, for fierce Asian American women activists, which, by the way, we sell a t-shirt called For Activists on our online shop, and their names are listed. It's one of our most popular items if you're interested. And all of us here who are involved in activism and politics have their shoulders that we are standing on. We also know that beyond these leaders, it is everyday people and our collective efforts that change the world. And this year, we're especially focused on making sure that AANHPI women participate civically and make sure our voices are heard. We have a saying at NAPAWF: be seen, be heard, and be fierce. And AANHPI women have been demonstrating that, and here are the numbers. In 2020, AANHPI women voters turned out in record numbers for the 2020 elections, recognizing the extraordinary stakes for women and AANHPI communities. Based on polling data after the 2020 election, we have learned that 8 in 10 AANHPI women voters who took part in a national-wide poll reported they participated in early voting. The number of AANHPI women voters who voted for the first time increased by 8 points compared to 2018. And while AANHPI women are determined to make their voices heard, 2 in 5 of us reported having to deal with challenges while voting, including being asked to show IDs at the poll, long voting lines, and disinformation on social media. There's no doubt that AANHPI women are engaged and participating in elections to make sure our voices are heard. We know what issues are important to us and to our communities and our families. However, AANHPI women scarcely run for and become elected to public office and are not proportionately represented in federal government positions. In 2021, AANHPI women made up only 0.3% of elected leaders across all levels of government, while making up 3.7% of the country's total population. According to the Office of Personnel Management, only 4% of federal government executives are Asian, and only 0.1% are Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. This year, in 2024, we have so much at stake for our communities, and we need to be seen and heard at every level of our community and government. With this backdrop and understanding, I am very excited to host this special conversation with two amazing AANHPI civic and community leaders. Our guests today will reflect and share with us their joy and unique experiences that brought them to public service and the power of civic engagement. We will save some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A window not the chat function, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can during Q&A. Today's panel is also being recorded and will be shared out to our email listserv. So if you have not already signed up to receive updates, please visit napawf.org, napawf.org, and click on the sign up button at the top of the page to join. Thank you. I'm excited to welcome our guests today, Erica Muritsugu and Representative Anna Eskamani. Erica is Deputy Assistant to the President and AANHPI Senior Liaison at the White House. She has spent her career in the fight for social justice and empowering underserved communities. Before joining the White House, Erica held leadership roles at the National Partnerships for Women and Families, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Anti-Defamation League, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She has also worked closely with members of Congress, including Senators Tammy Duckworth and Daniel Akaka, and held several roles in the Senate Democratic Policy Committee under Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Truly, Erica's accomplishments are vast and hard to encapsulate in a brief introduction. What's most important is that she shares NAPAWF's vision for structural and systemic change. Thank you for being here today, Erica. It's my pleasure to welcome Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani. Representative Eskamani is an unapologetic champion of reproductive freedom, and she also advocates on other critical issues, including economic justice, immigrant rights, healthcare access, and community safety. Representative Eskamani was born and raised in Orlando, is a proud daughter of Iranian immigrants, and is the first Iranian American to be elected to public office in Florida. Representative Eskamani is a community organizer who served as Senior Director of Public Affairs and Communications for Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. She has been described as a bridge builder, authentic, and unafraid. Thank you so much for being here, Representative Eskamani.
Thank you for having me.
So just to kick this off, I know that was a really long introduction, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me. We're going to hear from Erica and Anna more. So first question, I'm kicking it off to you, Representative Eskamani. I'd love to hear your story of what brought you to public office.
Oh, absolutely. And again, thanks so much for creating space for us. And it's really such a joy to join everyone today as we not only mark Women's History Month, but put a special emphasis on Asian American women in public office and in places of advocacy and leadership. And so for me, like so many of our families, I come from humble beginnings. I'm the daughter of working class immigrants. My parents actually came from different parts of Iran, but met each other working at the same donut shop in Orlando. And like so many families, my parents worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. My dad actually went to University of Central Florida while raising 3 kids and working as a waiter at the airport here in Orlando. My mom had a job at different fast food establishments and eventually at Kmart. And that was unfortunately her last job because she passed away when I was 13 years old after a long fight with cancer. And we struggled, especially with just the trauma of that loss. But my mom is a major motivator for who I am today and for the work that I do because she was so incredibly selfless in every way. And despite not having a lot of resources, we had a whole lot of love. And my mom was such a role model for me in every single way. So as I got older and navigated a world without her, I started to seek different types of literature and stories about women like my mom. And I felt this sense of attraction to stories written by women, about women, where I started learning more about the women's rights movement and just the struggles that so many women of color have faced in being able to establish themselves as valued and deserving individuals in this country, and of course, around the world. And as I started digging more into those stories, into that literature, and kind of building my own, sense of wonder and my values, I eventually would go to the University of Central Florida myself and just dive deep into community organizing, community building, volunteering with multiple nonprofits and advocacy organizations, really finding a home in the reproductive rights movement in particular, where I was also a patient at Planned Parenthood, receiving access to contraception as a college student. So that's a really quick synopsis to just my pathway into advocacy. You know, I would travel to Tallahassee to advocate for reproductive rights, which is our state capital here in Florida. I eventually was offered a job, as you mentioned in my biography, at Planned Parenthood, and I worked there for 6 years, rising to become the Senior Director of Public Affairs and Communications across 22 counties and 11 health centers with a staff of 6. And I was only about 26 years old at that time. So when I look back, you know, I'm always kind of bewildered by how much I was doing at such a young age, right? And of course, I didn't stop there. I just kept going. And so I made the decision to run for office as a first-time candidate alongside so many other women in 2018 and flipped my seat from red to blue and have been in a place of service now going into my 4th and final term in 2024. And so it's been an incredible journey. And again, just really grateful to be here with you.
That is amazing. I think there's so many elements of your story that's super inspiring, but also so relatable, right? Like how many of us started with, reading and through college, and to be able, to flip a seat and do what you do. I think that's such incredible encouragement and inspiration to so many folks that, I often hear elected say like anybody can do it. I'm like, I don't think so, but it's true, right? It always takes that first step. And so thank you so much for sharing your story and your passion for, especially for reproductive rights, but just, being a women leader in public service. So so excited to hear more from you. And Erica, I think one important takeaway from the diverse leadership roles you've held throughout your career is the range of opportunities in public service outside of elected positions. Can you share your story in your pathway to public service and working in the federal government?
No, for sure. And aloha, y'all. Happy Women's History Month. And first of all, thank you, Songyan, for your leadership and the generosity of sharing your NAPOP platform with us. NAPOP and its network and allies are so important to so many, including me, personally and professionally, and it has been for years. And Representative Eskamani, what an honor to be on this panel with you and share a Zoom screen with you. You are such an inspiration to us all, and I just want to foot stomp and reinforce something that Sunyan said. Not everybody can do it. I mean, you're doing 2 things that I will never do in my life, and that's run for elected office and serve in elected office. I'm not, I think, talented or courageous enough for it. So thank you so much for all of your service. I cannot wait to see what's next. Now, when you asked Sunyan about the journey to federal service, I love this question, because there are a lot of different ways to serve the community. I've been in the congressional branch, the federal branch now, again, state government, nonprofit advocacy, and even as a corporate lawyer and a lobbyist in a past life, led or founded community and civil rights organizations and volunteered on political campaigns. So, as you said, that there are a variety of opportunities in public service that are not elected. And I'm here to tell you that I've tried nearly all of them. My first stop in government was actually when I was 18 years old. A week after graduating from high school, I just moved from Hawaii to work at the Department of Justice in the typing pool before I decided to go to college. I don't even know if the typing pool even exists anymore. Many of you have maybe not even heard it. Be like utterly flummoxed for like why something is so necessary. Now that we've got AI to like guess what we're thinking and want to type. But in Hawaii, yeah, I know, right? A federal job in Hawaii back in the day is our stepping stone to the middle class. It's stable with good benefits and it's union protected. And so we move a little bit forward. During my last year in college, I came back and forth to Washington, D.C. From Williamsburg to work for part of the week as a secretary at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And yes, this was during something a long, long time ago called the Clinton administration. I'm really trying to make sure that I establish myself as the elder diva here. But I ended up going part-time to law school at night, and did well enough to get picked up by a big law firm when I graduated, practicing international trade and immigration law. And while I was at the law firm, now representing clients in front of the government, I took some spare time to create and lead political and community empowerment organizations and initiatives, volunteering in civil rights, and in party politics. So I wasn't bored, but I also wasn't sleeping very much either. And there was a point there when I was nearing consideration for partner at the law firm, when I realized that the thing that sparked joy in my life and literally kept me up all night after my billable hours were in, was the volunteer work in community and in politics and policy that I was doing. So I took a leap and returned to government service to work for Senator Harry Reid from Nevada, who'd just taken over as Senate Majority Leader, and doing the policy and legal work that I'd been trained to do, but this time in the Congress, for a lot less money and probably about the same lack of sleep. Sonia was kind enough in her intro to run through where the story takes me from there. More Senate service, 2 agencies under the Obama-Biden administration, another Senate opportunity, and 2 nonprofits. And all of this underscores how incredibly lucky I've been. But the point here is, and this is why some parents and grandparents would not at all like my example when they asked me to talk to their kids and young professionals about career tracks, because my path was not linear or traditional. And I went from making money to working back in government, which is not everybody's vision for their kids or their grandkids. But it was the mix of chasing opportunities that I felt were fulfilling and impactful, even in small ways, kind of a combination of the economic policy and law by day and civil rights and community volunteers and work to fit that in, that led to this honor of a lifetime, a return back to government service again, where the personal and the professional combine in service and probably nowhere else except in public service. To serve as the first ever Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander senior liaison at the White House, as a member of the president's senior team, working on policy and engagement, and both, representing the president in the Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities, but also being the representative of the AANHPI communities back to the president. So it's very special. And it all comes back to government for me.
Amazing. I mean, both of your stories are so inspiring. I mean, and like the common theme is like, look at you being fierce and like going and getting everything, right? Like you've set your mind to it. I mean, the fact that you were running an entire division of Planned Parenthood when you were 26, I'm still stuck on that. And I really am just so like blown away by your not only like your talent and your ability to do all this, but your commitment to service and to serve our communities. And to your point, Representative Eskamani, like learning from your mom about being selfless and being of service, like that is really inspiring, right? Like, I mean, the path y'all have chosen are, clearly, Erica, not something that, people want to send their children to pursue law schools and big law firms, right? But that the roles that you all have played in your life so far and that you continue to play are so important. And it's so important to see people that look like us in those roles, right? Because I remember often it's like, oh, volunteering, oh, that's white people thing. Like, let the white people do that. You go make lots of money being a lawyer. Let the white people do the no pay jobs, right? And I think it takes all of us and people that look like us to have the presidency here to represent our community and vice versa, right? To make sure that our community gets what we need and that this country reflects its leadership and its decisions reflect our values. And that only can happen authentically when we have a seat at the table. So I want to thank you both for what you do, because I think that's really, really important and inspiring. And you know what? If my kid decides to run for office, like I will be her campaign director. Like I think it's just so important to see this as a real important part of how we participate in the fabric of this country as people who are members of the society, right? So thank you so much for that. And I want to ask, given that you all kind of giggled when I said, wow, we let the white people do that thing. Like, did you have people that looked like us that were your mentors? Did you have AANHPI leaders, especially women leaders who were mentors, to look up to as you're doing your own trailblazing and creating your path?
Yeah, that is such a beautiful question. And I'm really thinking about it because, I mentioned my mom, right? I mean, she's such a huge inspiration for me. I'm a firm believer that death may end a life, but not a relationship. And so I just feel very lucky that I knew her for the 13 years that I did. When I look back at so many of my other mentors and role models, I mean, I feel really blessed because I've always had just incredible support in my public school. My first bosses were always so incredible and kind. But to your point, there really wasn't a prevalence in advocacy spaces for me in Florida of fellow Asian Americans. In a lot of cases, oftentimes I was the only person of, some sort of Asian descent. Now, with that said, I find a lot of solidarity, alongside other communities, and of course, other women. One of my biggest mentors at UCF was my Women Gender Studies Department Director, Dr. Maria Cristina Santana. And so I feel very lucky because I basically had a lot of mama bears, kind of adopt me and mentor me and take care of me. I do want to give a shout out to one of my former colleagues at Planned Parenthood, that is Dr. Sujatha Prabhakaran. And so Dr. Prabhakaran, very similar. She was one of the only individuals at Planned Parenthood of Asian descent. Her family is part of the Indian diaspora. And she was our vice president of medical affairs. She was not only an abortion provider, but helped to lead, all of our services on medical professionals and high quality care. And I mean, just an incredible woman. And oftentimes, she and I would be two of the only people, right, in some of these spaces. And I know going through medical school is very challenging for her too, another field dominated by mostly white men. And so I always really admired her and continue to admire her and the incredible strength that she shows. But, I hate to say it, but I am the first Iranian American elected to any public office in Florida and still the only one, right? And in the state legislature, I'm the only person of Middle Eastern descent, and I am the only woman of Asian descent. I think we have one other colleague that in the Republican caucus whose mom is Korean. And so it's definitely a gap for us in Florida politics. We do have judges that are in the Asian American diaspora, which is very exciting. We have at least 2 judges in my circuit, but it's definitely it's that pipeline is starting to be built, and I think as more Asian Americans participate in whether it's government or advocacy, it doesn't inspire others to do the same. I have many former interns of mine that are Asian American, and I know for a fact that seeing a lawmaker that is connected on a cultural level, that is first generation, that is younger, I think all those factors do help other young women and young people in general see that they can also participate in that way. And that is a responsibility that I take as a mentor, because again, to the heart of this question, I can't say that I had a lot of mentors, right? So my job is to be a mentor to others, is to create that path forward. And I will never forget my dad telling me, like so many immigrant families, to study engineering, mathematics, biology, physics, and my dad is an engineer now. So to give you perspective, right? I mean, that was the path forward, and I definitely challenged it, but my hope is that that inspires other young people like me to also not just see themselves, in one lens, to consider all the other opportunities to be civically minded.
Thank you. What about you, Erica?
Well, just reflecting on what the representative said about our parents' expectations and aspirations for us. What you mentioned before, which I actually hadn't even thought about before, like when I put myself through law school and went to big law, that was living our ancestors' wildest dreams. we had accomplished the American dream, and part of, I think, our challenge, what we say in Hawaii, is our kuleana, our responsibility, which is both an honor and a burden, is to like change that up a little bit, disrupt it, and like everybody here on the Zoom like has redefined what the American dream is, because we're living it, even if it's hard, and sometimes the hardest work is most important. And I've learned that because of some of the inspirations in my life from the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, women in particular. I mean, so many family members, icons and history makers, colleagues and inspirations. I was probably first deeply influenced by Representative Patsy Mink. She was the first woman of color elected to the entire U.S. Congress in the history of the universe, who had so many accomplishments that included the enactment and expansion of Title IX protections against discrimination on the basis of sex. And she actually left the Congress to care for her family, and so ran for local office back at home in Hawaii. And her city council race was literally the first campaign I ever worked on. And I was 10 years old. I was doing sign waving on the sidewalk, and I would do cleanup after the backyard barbecue fundraisers for her. So I honor her nearly every day. And next month, the U.S. Mint is going to release the Patsy Mink Quarter, the first Japanese American on U.S. currency, as part of their women's series. And so, like, if we still had payphones or bus fare instead of cell service and flight cards, you would be thinking about her every day the way I do, because you would have her quarter in your pocket just in case of emergencies. And of course, I've also had extraordinary bosses. Senator Daniel Keakaka, who taught me to lead with aloha, and Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, who is a hero to so many of us for so many reasons. So this is like a little bit of a laundry list or a bibliography of a who's who that's famous in Asian American. You can do the homework on if you haven't heard of them yet. But for me, it's important to name them. Because in Hawaii, we say "okage sama de." It's a Japanese phrase that we take to mean, because of you, I am what I am. And it was important to have this leadership community of support. Song-Young, you said that, kind of paraphrasing, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And for me, that's okage sama de, to see success stories and benefit directly from their examples. Because once I left Hawaii for the U.S. continent when I was a teenager, I was often the only Asian American woman, or only woman of color, and sometimes the only woman or any person of color in a room. And this is my experience. I know this is, you know what that's like. But it's because of the toil and struggle and brilliance of these historical leaders, I never felt like I was walking into those rooms alone. We also say Giri and Otagai back home. And these are connected concepts of our duty to our elders and our duty to the generations yet to come. And so the extraordinary leaders that I serve now to support today also need to be named as inspirations and influencers. We have 4 Asian American members of the President's Cabinet, and they are all women. Ambassador Catherine Tai, Acting Secretary of Labor Julie Su, Office of Science and Technology Policy Director Arati Pradhaker, and the first woman, the first Asian American serving in the second highest office in our land, I never get tired of saying it, Madam Vice President Kamala G. Harris. And so when we say, if you can see her, you can be her, it does. It shows what the art of the possible is. It demonstrates what a community of belonging means, so we can see ourselves in these different and new contexts. It changes the narrative of what shapes our current generation of young leaders, and the way they strive toward the future with their leadership. And with these examples, we can see and show that in this context, we're not just represented by the government, we are a part of the government. And I think that's a beautiful view.
I love it. Oh my goodness. You have a very unique story. Like, here we are, we've never seen an Asian American mentor before, and you're like listening, so that's really amazing, and just such a unique story. But I have to say, when you said you worked on Patsy Mink's campaign, I was like, how old is Erica? Yeah. So, but I mean, seriously, I think, like the perspectives you both bring and the people that have mentored you or that you have learned from, like, it's everyday people to like the people that you worked for, that you partnered with. I mean, there's a list, right? And I'm so glad that there are more of you in this world, that other, folks who want to follow into your footsteps can look up to. And Eric, I hope you write a book one day about all the amazing API women in your life. Like, I think that's a book right there. So copyright it before somebody else takes the idea. I really think there's something there, and all the nuggets that you've learned along the way. Just to pivot a little bit, I think our viewers would love to hear about like how your work directly impacts our community. So I want to start with Erica. Pivoting here a little bit, like your work at the White House and your position is unique and really important in that that you are finding ways to bring AANHPI perspectives and priorities into the conversations at the White House. How does the work that you do at the White House and in DC connect and impact directly to AANHPI communities?
So first, in that book that I'm going to write, Sonia, can I put you in that book too, about these like amazing
you're so sweet.
influence life, and it's had so much impact on folks. So that'll be a chapter in my, but it's a memoir, political science treatise, or whatever. But with respect to your question about the work that we do in the administration, to bring Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander perspectives and priorities into more conversations, it's important to note that I don't do this work alone. I sit organizationally in the Chief of Staff's office, so I have the cooperation and collaboration of every component in the White House and across the interagency and intergovernmental levers, and with the partnership and the collaboration and the thought leadership of stakeholders who are doing the hard work at the end of the service spectrum too. I also have partners focused specifically on AANHPIs in the administration, with the White House Initiative on AANHPIs, which is led by the first ever Native Hawaiian to lead this historic initiative, Krista Ka'ai, and also the White House Office of Public Engagement, where our work for the community is led by Kota Mitsukami. And together, we've produced the first ever national strategy to help ensure equity, justice, and opportunity for AANHPIs. And this is the product of several dozen agency commitments that you should hold us accountable to, and we actually hold ourselves accountable for. We're also working to address longstanding issues like that have affected the AANHPI community like for decades. And this is, again, not something that I've created. This is carrying on the vision and the commitment that the president and the vice president had long before they were sworn into this office. But it does, and it range from data disaggregation, language access, economic equity, housing affordability and access, educational opportunity, health disparities, voting rights, immigration, climate change, and civil rights. And it's also my job, zooming out from the kind of systemic problems that are kind of ingrained and hard-baked in government programs even, to zoom out and ensure that these kind of cornerstone national policy accomplishments that you hear about on mainstream news are impactful to and influenced by the AANHPI communities. So we look at like the American Rescue Plan or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the IIJA. If you look at all of these like once in a generation types of investments that we've enacted, every single one of them is impactful on, but also informed by the experiences of AANHPI individuals, families, and communities. And it's my job to make sure that, we're continuing to process that and course correct where we need to and measure the impact and deepen its impact. So I think that we've made a lot of progress, but we know that our work is not done. We need to restore the freedom to seek an abortion to promote women's health. And on Maui, the Biden-Harris administration is going to stay fully engaged in recovery efforts to help the people of Maui rebuild the way they want to rebuild, and to make sure that it's community-led government supported. This is work that is an honor to be a part of, not just because I'm from Hawaii, but because in a multicultural, pluralistic society like the one that exists in Lahaina, there are unique needs that you can't just drop a template on. You need to approach it with cultural sensitivity, and we actually have cultural protocol officers invested in the work and the continuing work, and they'll continue to stay on the ground there. We also announced the development of the first ever U.S. national strategy to counter Islamophobia and related forms of discrimination and hate in the United States, because for too long, Muslims, Arabs, and Sikhs in America have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks and other discriminatory acts, and we need to change that.
Yeah.
We're also expanding and deepening the first ever national strategy to ensure gender equity and equality, led by our friend and Shiro, Jen Klein, leader of the first ever Gender Policy Council here at the White House. And in addition, there's still work to do around issues that are deeply impactful on AANHPs, like caregiving infrastructure. The care economy is one of our fastest growing sectors, and yet jobs are often entry level and low paid or unpaid labor. The White House is ease the burdens of all caregivers and care workers, the majority of whom are women of color and immigrants. And with it's not just what we do, it's how we do it, with inclusivity and honoring and naming our differences as we celebrate our unity, and always acknowledging the different and multiple identities that we might labor under, from a gender or sexual orientation or gender identity or disability lens. And then finally, always in coalition.
Thank you. Always doing a lot and so much. I mean, it's just it's so specific, but so broad. And I mean, just your ability, you and Crystal and her team ability to juggle all of it I'm always inspired and really grateful for the representation. So thank you so much for all of that. And I hope that, folks can really think about what of the things you've said really resonate with them and can really figure out how to plug in and participate, right? Because I mean, I know this is so corny, but I still believe it. Democracy is a verb, right? We have to participate. You can't sit around and complain about how bad things are. It's on us to fix it. We got to roll our hands up and our sleeves up and get our hands dirty. So Representative Eskamani, I would love to hear a little bit about your own legislative agenda and work and how it impacts AANHPI women and communities in Florida.
Oh, absolutely. Well, oh man, I mean, just being in public office as a first generation child of immigrants, I organically do what I can to ensure that no community is left behind. Because I look back to my childhood and my parents had no idea who their state representative was. My parents were voters once they both became U.S. citizens in presidential elections. And I do remember watching, the presidential debates as a kid. My mom would take us to the polling place to vote, but I never remember any indication that we knew who represented us at a local level. And the reality is that the local level is what matters the most. So when I first got elected, I made a commitment to ensuring that we would represent every person that calls District 42 home. And a part of that also means trying to make government more accessible to our community, our diverse community. And then, of course, while working on, translating materials, on hosting multiple diverse town halls, of course, we also had Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy in office, who she made history herself. And so while we were on that trajectory, COVID happened. And so then you saw just this rise in anti-Asian American fervor. And of course, also saw a demand on government services, from unemployment compensation to vaccines and so forth. So our office really championed a lot of these issues, and I'm really proud of the work that we did in those first months of the pandemic, not just in helping people access their unemployment benefits, which so many of the most directly impacted jobs in Florida with the shelter-at-place order are jobs where predominantly people of color and women of color work in. And because we have such a heavy tourism economy, this is going to be a lot of our hotel staff, a lot of our also nail salons. And of course, that's a dominant workforce that impacts Asian American women specifically. So we were really working hard just to champion these safety nets for our community, ensuring that even if English was not your first language, you could still access these services, these benefits. We also hosted vaccine drives with our Vietnamese churches, and I was really proud of that partnership. And it was really cool because we would see a multi-generational approach. Oftentimes it was the younger generations bringing their elders to the vaccine site, helping to translate materials. And I mean, these were families that never could have accessed the COVID-19 vaccine unless we made it accessible, unless there are resources and promotion provided in their language. And so I was very proud of the fact that we not only prioritized that, but we delivered on that. And just seeing the generations of people that came through our event, filled me with so much pride, so much joy. Fast forward to the legislative work. So we actually have championed AAPI education in Florida to teach the historical contributions of the Asian American community. We were successful working across the aisle and getting that done. And huge shout out to the Make Us Visible campaign, as this was a major initiative of theirs. And so Florida is still working on the content of this, and we have to be candidly really critical of Florida's process because we do not have a good track record in respecting history. And so this is an ongoing process, but the law was passed to say that in K-12 curriculum, we have to integrate parts of Asian American history in Florida. And as long as we can get that right, I think it's going to be just a game changer for our local communities to understand this history and to help combat hate and xenophobia and other types of discrimination that the Asian American community continues to face today. And then, of course, for a more just holistic approach, right? I mean, just thinking about economic disparities and thinking about access to healthcare. At the end of the day, a lot of our communities, they face the same challenges as any other community, but their income levels, their identities, their geographical location, the languages they speak, all that determines what kind of access you have to these opportunities that this country is so proud to offer. And so part of my job is to break down those barriers. So what can we do to ensure that every person has a right to vote? What can we do to ensure that if you are in need of an abortion, you can access that service without facing barriers? What can we do to ensure that if you are LGBTQ+, that you can be yourself and not live a life of fear? So we're also championing these issues from an intersectional lens and helping to ensure that individuals that are eligible to vote can vote and don't face discrimination or language barriers or other types of administrative burden. So we do what we can to champion all those issues from the grassroots up, and we do it with an intersectional lens.
Thank you for that. I mean, that's a lot. I'm like, and you also have only 24 hours like the rest of us. Oh, that's pretty amazing. And actually, on the note about making ballots accessible, I think this question is so important for us to hear from both of you about. And that's, for this year with so much on the line for our communities, for AANHPI women and communities, why is it so important for AANHPI women to be civically engaged?
I'm gonna give that to Erica first.
Yeah, thanks. It is, and you noted all of the stats at the top, but it's important to remember that as the fastest growing racial group in the nation, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders are dramatically rising in civic engagement and voting power. And we've proven it time and time again. We're no longer at the margin of victory. We are and it cannot be taken for granted, both by policymakers, but also the enthusiasm gap. People have expectations of government officials. And so if we want to cement the wins we've already achieved and continue to advance and to keep us from backsliding, it's really critical to remain engaged. And it means a lot of things. You know, in addition to the civic participation in the voting process, we also have a responsibility and an opportunity to help us stay true to our values, and to extend a hand to our neighbors and volunteer with local community service organizations or houses of worship or NAPOF affiliates, to keep from building walls between us and our fellow Americans. And it takes all of us to do so. And it means inclusivity, intersectionality, and that coalition building that I talked about. Let me just make this point. I'm going to quote the president on this. Of all people, women have been demonstrating their power at local, state, and national levels, especially when it comes to reproductive freedom. And this is what the president said in the State of the Union a couple weeks ago. He said, quote, "Clearly, those bragging about overturning Roe versus Wade have no clue about the power of women in America." And when you double that down with some integrated identities of Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and many other things, I mean, we're just formidable. And I do believe that it's our responsibility. It's an honor, but it's an opportunity. We have a choice in front of us in so many ways. And I'll just end with, you know, the Biden-Harris administration has made so many strides, but we haven't gotten this far without the engagement and activism and coalition that occurs only because of leaders like y'all. Anyway, so that's just a thank you for all that you have done and are doing, and will keep doing.
Thank you. Anna, do you want to add to that?
I mean, she does such a beautiful job. I don't know what else there is to add, honestly. I mean, it's just so important for us to continue to you know, be those role models and encourage that level of engagement and collective efficacy. I mean, there's just so many everyday people, especially those in the greater, you know, Asian American, Pacific Islander diaspora, whose voices are so needed right now. And it can be you can feel very deflated sometimes and very disenchanted, where it almost feels easier and, you know, more peaceful, if you will, to tap out. But the reality is that there's a lot of forces that want you to feel that way, that want you to disengage at that level. And I just think it's so important for us to not lose our voice in this process, and to realize how necessary our greater community is in the makeup of this democracy, of this incredible experiment we call American democracy. And so we really need to make sure, especially the next generation, understands that.
Thank you both. I mean, that's right where we are at NAPOF, right? Like, we have made so much strides, and, you know, I like, even from 10, 20 years ago, like AANHPI women are being more seen and more heard, and like, why would we want to stop now? And so thank you for that encouragement. And really, like, NAPOF is committed to making sure we are engaging and inspiring and motivating folks, because our voices need to count. That's bottom line, right? So thank you. We have one question, and, you know, I have a feeling my staff are very nervously watching the clock. So it's a pretty straightforward, brief question, but just wondering if either of you or both of you want to chime in on how did you overcome the challenges in accessing financial resources, institutional support, and political networks?
That's a great question. I mean, I will say that a part of it, I think, is it's relationships and it's trust building. You know, I think a lot of folks, when I first ran for office, there were some that didn't think I could do it, mainly because the district that I represent it was a flip seat. So it was not, you know, a seat that you could walk into, you had to fight for it. And of course, my district doesn't have a large proportion, for example, of Iranian Americans. Like, I think a lot of folks assume that when they learn that I'm Iranian American, the assumption is that, oh, she must represent a district with a large proportion or something, right? And that's just not the case. My district is actually like 75% white. And so it was important to build bridges. It was important to build trust, to understand the needs, the diverse needs of my community, to listen. And again, I do feel like my growing up as a first generation working class kid helped me be a empathetic, kind, and committed, hardworking person that you can build connections with folks of different experiences. And when folks would find out that I was of Iranian descent, it was really humbling because they would tell me about the first boss they had who was Iranian, or a roommate they had who was Iranian, how much they love Persian food, and where can they find Persian food? Like, you just end up having these really incredible conversations that you otherwise wouldn't have if you hid from your identity, if you shied away from those conversations. And I've really tried to also educate my community on different cultures, including my cultural identity. And in fact, we just celebrated the Persian New Year this week. So I've been sharing a lot about that. And, we had a Lunar Day parade in Orlando. It's one of the biggest events every year that all of us participate in. So I think a part of it too is just, kind of cracking the mold a little bit, right? And being yourself. And part of being yourself is creating an inclusive environment where others want to join you, want to be a part of it. And again, I described this earlier, but like, just through that effort, you will attract more people that have never thought of themselves as being politically engaged, but they're going to knock on the doors for the first time. I mean, I want to give a quick shout out to FAJA. FAJA is the Florida Asian American Justice Alliance, and they formed in our state following another, unfortunately, discriminatory policy, in this case, targeting specifically Chinese Americans and their ability to purchase property. And so this is a law that's being litigated in the courts right now. And so I've never seen, it was remarkable. I've never seen so many Asian American and Pacific Islander voices come to Tallahassee. I mean, it was sad that it happened because of a bad bill, but it was also inspirational to see hundreds some people show up in opposition to legislation because it directly impacted their lives. And that was a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of members of our community who historically have either not been politically engaged or just vote and don't do anything else, right? And so that awakening has continued to build in Florida. And so now I see more Asian Americans who want to run for office, and they're looking for opportunities. They want to help raise money for candidates. I mean, it's just a really cool catalyst for better things to come that I'm very excited about. And it speaks to how the network is growing, right? Like, so yes, there were so many barriers to overcome, but here's the hope. When you overcome them, others won't have to go through the same type of layers of barriers. And so we carry that torch and we push it forward for the hope that the next group that comes after us won't have to go through as many challenges as we do. And I do feel like we're having that shift in the Sunshine State.
That's exciting. What about you, Erica? Do you have any advice on this question?
Yeah, so I mean, it actually just reinforces, I think, in a different context, in a little bit of a different way, what Representative Eskamani is talking about in terms of like the connections. And I would say that it's fueled a lot by imagination, and I guess some people would call it empathy, but like reaching beyond ourselves to see our impact, but also recognizing in others where, they don't necessarily, like for me, I used to raise money. And now I try to make those connections for other people so they're not so isolated in a way that I never experienced until I was a teenager and I moved to the U.S. continent, right? I didn't know I was a minority. I knew I was feminist, but like, I grew up in a majority minority community in Hawaii, and learning and recognizing and acknowledging, even within the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, how isolated some people are. Let alone if you grew up in a dominant culture perspective in the middle of the country where people of color are very rare, or transnational adoptees, or minorities within the minority group, folks who live on the margins of our marginalized communities. These are like really important things to like recognize and name and honor in this large collective that is like our power in terms of 23 million strong and the fastest growing as a coalition, a political coalition. Name and honor the differences within us, I think, is a big part of being seen and heard and valued in a meaningful way. And that's why, we celebrate the rich culture and heritage of our diverse communities, including like Lunar New Year and Tet and Tibetan Losar. Happy Nowruz. We are in the holy month of Ramadan. look forward to honoring American Samoa Flag Day, the Saki with the Sikh community, Mahavir Jayanti with the Jain community, and Vesak with the global Buddhist community. Also, just, again, finding the connections through our differences and recognizing that our unity is stronger. And I think I think the question was about resources, but that is a resource. People are a resource.
Mm-hmm.
And also not just who we are as a collective in our individual capacities and how rich that tapestry looks, but also how we got here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I came into this Black and Jewish spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and many Americans came here with civil rights because of the coalition and the hard work and literal blood and death sometimes, that we inherited. And we need to honor that too. And again, those are all connections. Those are things that have literally helped me personally and professionally and emotionally and probably existentially. But I do think that there's a lesson learned there if you model it out to the historical arc of where we are and where we come from and where we want to go, but where we might go if we don't get the deflection moment right. That there's a lesson and a learning that can be replicated, in other contexts, like in the political context, like in other types of resourcing. But people and humanity and recognizing our commonality is a resource, and I think that's a facilitator.
Yeah. No, that both of your comments are so grounding, right? It's not, there's no magic, there's no secret sauce. It's you connect with people, right? You do the personal connections, and I think for folks who run for office, I'm do you like talking to people? Because you really have to like talking to people, right? Knocking on doors, just that it's the very basic human connections that's going to yield our ability to overcome these challenges. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. And thank you both so much for your time today. This has been such a treat. I forget how I love having a moment in my day to hear from folks like you. Just, we're just always going, and it's just so inspirational. And I'm going to tell them, this is going to be, we try to tell one highlight story of our day, in my family. I'm going to tell my daughter about you too tonight. Because I think she would get such a kick out of that. We went to vote together on Tuesday, and so she loves to learn about my day, and I will definitely be highlighting both of you. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your time today, Representative Eskamani and Erica.
Thank you so much for having us. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone, for sticking with us through this panel. I hope it was inspirational and that you all have learned something new. I just want to also highlight that we do have other events coming up and would love for you to stay engaged. So please sign up on our website, NAPAWF.org, to learn more about upcoming events. We will have a virtual event recognizing AANHPI Equal Pay Day happening in April and Heritage Month in May. And so we have more details to come. You can also follow us on our social media channels. And again, thank you for being here today. And I hope this conversation was meaningful and fruitful for